Hello, dreamer. I'll be your storyteller tonight. Like and subscribe for more bedtime stories and share in the comments where you're listening from. I had just moved into a new apartment in a mid-sized city, looking for something affordable but safe. The building was old, built in the 70s with creaky floors, narrow hallways, and a faint musty smell that lingered in every corner. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, and I needed a place to live while I figured out my life. The first few weeks were uneventful. I unpacked boxes, arranged my furniture, and got used to the faint hum of the heating system that seemed to echo through the walls. The neighbors were quiet, polite enough when I passed them in the hallway. Life was ordinary. That all changed one Tuesday night. I was sitting in my living room, scrolling on my phone and sipping tea when I heard it. A faint thump from the apartment above mine. At first, I didn't think much of it. People above me had their routines, maybe moving furniture or dropping something. But then I heard it again, a rhythmic thump like someone walking heavily, pacing back and forth. I ignored it, thinking it would pass. But the thumping persisted, growing louder, more deliberate. It wasn't consistent with normal footsteps. It sounded almost like someone was trying to time it like a signal. My heart began to race. I put down my tea and listened closely. There it was again, a slow, measured step followed by a pause, then another. I tried to rationalize it. Old building, old floors, I muttered to myself. Maybe they're moving something heavy. But my gut twisted in unease. Something about the rhythm didn't feel right. That night, I barely slept. Every thump made me jump. Every creak in the ceiling sounded like footsteps following me. I woke to my alarm at 7 a.m., exhausted but determined to ignore it. I left for work telling myself I was imagining things. The next night, it got worse. I was cooking dinner when I heard a soft scraping sound from above, followed by the unmistakable thump. I froze. Then came a strange whisper, a faint, unintelligible murmur, almost like someone muttering to themselves. My blood ran cold. I went upstairs to knock on my neighbor's door. No answer. I knocked again, louder. Still nothing. The hallway was eerily quiet, almost too quiet. That's when I noticed the door to the apartment above mine was slightly ajar. My hand trembled as I reached for the handle, but it didn't budge. Locked from the inside, yet slightly open. I backed away slowly and returned to my apartment. I didn't tell anyone, fearing I would sound paranoid. But that night I stayed up, every sense on high alert, waiting for whatever it was above me to make its move. 2 days later, I returned from work to find something even more disturbing. My front door was slightly open. I never leave it unlocked. My heart pounded as I stepped inside. Nothing appeared missing. No signs of forced entry, no scattered items, nothing. But something felt off. I began installing cheap motion sensor cameras in my apartment just for peace of mind. I wanted proof. Something to confirm I wasn't losing my mind. The very next night, I reviewed the footage. My blood ran cold. Around 2 a.m., a shadow appeared at my bedroom door. Not moving fast, just standing there watching. I froze in my chair, heart hammering. The shadow lingered for several minutes before vanishing, leaving the frame blank. I rewound the footage. The shadow wasn't a trick of light. It was real. Someone had been in my apartment while I slept. I didn't know whether to call the police or run. I did neither. I stayed up that night, sitting on the couch with a baseball bat, lights on, staring at the ceiling. For weeks it continued. Items shifted slightly when I returned home. Packages I didn't order appeared at my doorstep. The thumping above persisted, always late at night, sometimes synchronized with the noises in my own apartment. I could hear whispering now, distinct words I couldn't quite make out, sometimes my name, sometimes laughter so soft it could have been imagined. One Friday, I decided I had to confront it. I knocked on the door above me. Silence. I pressed my ear to the door, and that's when I heard it. The faint scraping of furniture across the floor, slow and deliberate. Then, unmistakably, a voice whispered, "I see you." I stumbled back, heart racing. The voice wasn't aggressive, but it wasn't casual either. It was intimate, familiar, like someone who had been observing me for weeks. I called the police. Officers came, searched the building, checked the apartment above mine. They found it empty, vacant. No one had lived there for months. The unit had been under renovation, confirmed by the building manager. My gut twisted into knots. If no one lived there, who or what had been in my apartment? After that, I moved my cameras outside, pointing toward the hallway. For several nights, the footage was normal. Empty hallways, no suspicious movement. But then, one night around 3 a.m., I noticed a shadow pass by my door on the screen. A fleeting glimpse, but unmistakable. It didn't move like a human. It floated, slightly blurred, almost inhumanly silent. I started sleeping with all the lights on, doors locked, my phone in my hand, the bat nearby. I became hyper-aware of every sound. Every step in the hallway, every creak in the ceiling, every distant murmur made me jump. The building that had once felt safe now felt alive with an unseen presence. Months passed. I began seeing things in my peripheral vision. Shapes that vanished when I looked directly, shadows at the corners of my eyes. Sometimes at night I would hear faint laughter, soft but clear, coming from the empty apartment above me. My dreams were haunted by it. I would wake screaming, drenched in sweat, convinced someone was in my room. I started documenting everything. Every noise, every shift in the apartment, every shadow. I thought maybe a pattern would emerge, some rational explanation, but nothing did. The presence was unpredictable, intelligent, watching, waiting, playing with me. One night I woke to a cold breeze across my face. My bedroom window was closed. I sat up, trembling, and saw something impossible. Faint fingerprints glowing on the glass leading from the sill to the ceiling. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe condensation, maybe reflection, but my gut told me otherwise. Something had been there. Something had touched my window while I slept. I contacted the building management to ask about renovations, construction, anything unusual. They insisted no workers had been there at night. The apartment above mine had been locked, sealed, and monitored by the building. There was no way anyone should have been inside. Weeks later, I moved out. I couldn't take it anymore. I packed my belongings in the middle of the night, eyes constantly scanning the ceiling, the corners, the hallways. I left the lights on, hoping the presence wouldn't follow me. I never looked back. Even now, years later, I get chills thinking about it. Who or what was in that apartment? Why did it watch me? It never harmed me, never stole, never confronted, but the psychological toll was immense. I still dream about that shadow, the whispers, the floating figure at my door. I will never forget the sense of being observed, violated, and toyed with. I've told this story to friends, but no one believes me. Old building, paranoia, stress, they say, but I know what I experienced was real. The evidence is etched into my memory. The footsteps, the whispers, the shadow, the glow of fingerprints that shouldn't exist. I learned a terrifying truth. Sometimes the most dangerous intruders aren't human. Sometimes they exist beyond the rational, and they follow you in silence, leaving only fear behind. Even now, I sleep with a light on, doors locked, always listening for the rhythm of footsteps above me, always aware that someone or something is watching. And I know, deep down, that the apartment above mine will never truly be empty. I've always been cautious when driving at night, but I also have a habit of giving people rides when I can. It started as a practical thing. I often drive long distances for work, and I've picked up a few stranded travelers over the years without incident. That night, though, would change the way I see strangers forever. It was a Friday evening around 10:30 p.m., and I was driving home from a client meeting about an hour outside the city. The highway was nearly empty, the occasional streetlight flickering against the asphalt, casting long shadows that made the road feel endless. The air was cold and the wind whistled softly against my car. About 30 minutes into the drive, I noticed a figure on the side of the road, a young woman, maybe early 20s, standing with her thumb out. She looked nervous, wearing a hoodie and jeans, shivering slightly in the chill. Something about her posture made me hesitate. She didn't look like a regular hitchhiker. She looked desperate, but I'm not heartless. I slowed my car, pulling over and rolling down the window. "Need a ride?" I asked. She nodded quickly, sliding into the passenger seat without a word. Her eyes were wide, darting around as if she were being followed. There was a faint smell of perfume and something else, something metallic, faint but unsettling. I ignored it, offering her a small smile. "Where are you headed?" I asked. She hesitated, then whispered a town name that was several miles down the highway. "Perfectly along my route, not too far." I nodded and started driving again. At first, the ride was quiet. Too quiet. I tried small talk. Long day? Missed your ride? But she only shook her head or gave monosyllabic responses. Something about her made my skin crawl, but I dismissed it. She seemed scared and maybe she needed help. About 15 minutes in, I noticed her glancing at me frequently. Not normal glances, sharp, calculating, as if she were studying me. Then she spoke. "You live alone, don't you?" I froze. "Yes," I replied cautiously. "How did you know that?" She didn't answer, just stared straight ahead, her fingers gripping the seat tightly. My heart rate quickened. It was one thing to pick up a stranger. It was another to have them know intimate details about your life without explanation. I tried to keep calm, focusing on the road. "Did someone send you here?" I asked. She shook her head violently. "No. But they're watching." I swallowed hard. "Who's watching?" Her eyes locked onto mine in the rearview mirror. "Everything. You, me, the road. You don't know, but they see everything. They know your routines." I laughed nervously, thinking she was delusional or maybe just scared. "You've been out here all day?" "Must be cold," I said, trying to change the subject. But she didn't respond. Then it began, the subtle warnings. She would point out cars behind us, small details no one else could have noticed. "That black SUV has been following us for 10 miles. That van back there just changed lanes to stay behind us." I glanced in the mirror. At first I saw nothing unusual. Then after a few minutes, my stomach dropped. There it was, a black SUV trailing far enough behind to be inconspicuous, close enough to feel deliberate. I tried to stay calm. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe someone else was just on the road. But every time she spoke, I checked, and the vehicles were there, following, observing, maintaining distance, yet never passing. An hour passed like this. I stopped at a gas station to fill up, thinking maybe a public area would make me feel safe. I parked, leaving the engine running, and stepped out to pay. She stayed in the car, silent. When I returned, I noticed something chilling. A figure standing near the pumps, just watching. Not moving, not doing anything else. My heart thumped in my chest. The hitchhiker slid the door open. "They see you even here," she whispered. I gritted my teeth. "Who sees me?" Before she could answer, the figure at the pumps vanished. I glanced around, nothing, empty station. My pulse was racing, but I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was a passerby. Maybe my mind was playing tricks after hours on the dark highway. We got back on the road. By now I was tense, my hands gripping the wheel. The woman finally spoke more coherently. "They've been watching me too. I'm not supposed to be here. I'm supposed to stay hidden. But I had no choice. They know I took the wrong turn." "Who?" I asked, my voice shaking. She didn't answer, staring straight ahead. "Just drive," she said finally. "Don't look. Don't stop. Don't think." I followed her instructions, every instinct screaming at me. Another hour passed. The highway was empty except for a few distant headlights, and the black SUV had returned, keeping pace silently. Suddenly, she pointed. "Turn off here. Take the next exit. Don't let them see you." "They're fast," I obeyed. I turned down a narrow, deserted road, the tires crunching over gravel, and immediately felt the tension tighten in my chest. There were no lights, no signs, nothing but dense trees and shadows stretching across the road. Then it happened. The black SUV appeared behind us, headlights glaring, tires kicking up dirt as it chased. I pressed the gas, heart pounding, but the SUV kept pace, perfectly aligned. "Hide," she whispered urgently. I looked around. A side path led into the trees. I swerved down it, tires spinning, leaves flying. The SUV followed, and I realized this was no ordinary chase. Whoever was behind us knew every move, anticipated every turn. We drove deeper into the forest, the path narrowing. The woman reached for my hand, gripping it tightly. "They can't follow here," she said. "Not yet." The SUV slowed, stopped at the edge of the trees, unable to follow. I exhaled sharply, relief flooding me briefly until I realized something worse. It wasn't leaving. It was waiting, watching from the edge, lights off, engines silent. The woman guided me further into the woods, eventually leading me to a small cabin, hidden and dilapidated. Inside it was dark, the smell of old wood and mildew thick. She closed the door behind us. "They're patient," she said. "They wait, they follow, they watch. They've been following me for months. Now they know you exist too." I was shaking uncontrollably. What are they?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she handed me a small notebook. I flipped it open. Inside were detailed logs of my movements, my routes, my habits, even the streets I frequented. And not just mine, my family's, my friends, every interaction, every appointment. Someone had been tracking me with terrifying precision. "They know everything," she whispered. "They're always patient. They pick who to observe, who to touch, who to terrify. You're lucky they didn't catch you sooner." The realization hit me like a hammer. This wasn't random. It wasn't coincidence. It was orchestrated. Someone had been tracking us both, anticipating every move, waiting for the right moment. I spent the night in the cabin, unable to sleep, listening to the distant sounds of tires on gravel, shadows moving outside, and the soft whisper of the woman beside me. By morning, she had vanished, leaving the notebook and a single line scrawled on the wall. "They watch, they wait. They always find what they want." I left immediately, driving miles away from that forest, my nerves shredded, my mind racing. I never saw the woman again, never knew her name, or whether she had survived encounters like mine in the past. Even now, years later, I avoid driving alone at night. I check the rearview mirror obsessively, and I avoid strangers on the side of the road. I know that somewhere out there they're still watching, waiting for the next target, the next person too naive, too trusting, too unaware. And I know deep down that if they ever knew where I was now, there would be no escape, because patience is their weapon, observation is their game, and anyone can be their prey. I live alone in a small apartment on the edge of the city. My life is routine: wake up, go to work, come home, cook, watch a little TV, and sleep. I like the predictability, the sense of control, but everything changed one Thursday night, and I haven't felt safe in my own home since. It started innocuously. I was tired after a long day at work, and I decided to order dinner from an app. The restaurant was a few blocks away, but I preferred delivery. I placed the order, expecting the usual wait of about 40 minutes. I sat on my couch, scrolling through my phone, listening to the faint hum of the air conditioning. About 20 minutes in, I glanced out my living room window. That's when I saw a car parked in the driveway. A nondescript black sedan, dark windows, engine off. I froze, assuming it was another resident or a visitor to a neighboring apartment. But as I watched, no one got out. The car didn't move. It just sat there. I went back to my phone, trying to convince myself I was overreacting. Delivery would still take 20 more minutes. Maybe the driver had parked there. Maybe waiting for another building, maybe nothing at all. But every instinct in me screamed that this wasn't normal. When the delivery finally arrived, I opened the door. "Hi, food delivery," the driver said, holding the bag. I glanced past him. The black sedan was still there. "Did anyone just get out of that car?" I asked. The driver frowned. "No, just some guy in the driver's seat. Didn't look like he was moving." My stomach dropped. Thanks," I said, closing the door quickly. I didn't feel safe eating inside, but I did anyway, keeping an eye on the windows. 5 minutes after I started, there was a knock at the door. I jumped. The food was still on the counter. I cautiously approached and peeked through the peephole. No one. The hallway was empty. I stepped back, heart racing. And then I heard it. A slow creak from the living room floorboards. Someone moving inside my apartment. I grabbed the baseball bat I keep by the door. My phone was in my pocket, already dialing 911. I moved silently toward the living room, breathing shallow. The light from the street lamp outside cast long, distorted shadows across the room. Nothing. I forced myself to take a few steps inside. That's when I noticed it, the back door to the small balcony slightly ajar. I never leave it open. My blood ran cold. I crept toward it, every nerve screaming, and then I heard a whisper. My name, full name, clear, deliberate. I bolted for the door, slamming it behind me, locking it, and calling the police from outside. They arrived quickly, but when they entered, there was no one. Nothing had been stolen, no sign of forced entry. The only oddity was the black sedan parked across the street, gone by the time they looked. The following days were hell. I checked every corner of my apartment, every vent, every closet. I moved furniture, installed cameras, changed locks. Yet every night I could feel it, the presence. Shadows flickering at the corner of my vision. Soft noises. The faint impression that I was being watched while I slept. 2 weeks later, the apartment complex received a notice of another break-in in a neighboring building. But this one was different. Nothing stolen, no forced entry. The tenants reported feeling watched, hearing whispers, seeing shadows. The pattern was clear. Someone or something was choosing targets, and the goal wasn't theft. It was fear. I became hyper-aware. Every knock, every car, every reflection became a potential threat. I stopped leaving my apartment after dark. Even during the day, I noticed the shadows moving strangely, the feeling of eyes tracking me when no one should be around. It escalated one night. I was in the kitchen cooking when I heard my apartment door click. My heart leapt. The locks were all secure, but the sound was unmistakable. I crouched behind the counter, phone in hand, watching the door. Slowly, it creaked open. A figure stood in the doorway, tall, dressed entirely in black, face obscured. I froze, unable to scream. The figure didn't move, didn't speak. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished. I blinked, convinced I had imagined it. But on the counter was a small note written in precise, almost elegant handwriting. "I've been waiting. You know me, I didn't recognize my own handwriting. This was someone else. Someone who had been in my apartment, observing, leaving messages. The police were called again, but the note had no fingerprints, no DNA, nothing. From that night on, every delivery, every visitor, every unknown noise sent me into panic. I started sleeping with lights on, doors locked, cameras recording, yet the feeling never left. Shadows flitted where they shouldn't. Whispers followed me through the apartment, and small objects I didn't leave shifted positions overnight. Months passed, but the terror never waned. I learned to move silently, check my phone constantly, and watch the streets outside obsessively. Friends stopped visiting. Family warned me about paranoia, but I knew this wasn't paranoia. This was real. The breaking point came one morning. I woke to find my front door open. My phone was gone. I called the police, but they couldn't track it. I reviewed my cameras. The footage showed nothing, just a static hallway, no intruder entering or leaving. But I knew better. Whoever it was had entered, taken my phone, and left without leaving a trace. I left the apartment the same day. I haven't returned. The memory of that night, of the whispers, of the black sedan haunts me constantly. I still check over my shoulder even years later, feeling eyes on me when no one is there. Sometimes late at night I see black cars in my rearview mirror, parked where they shouldn't be. Shadows flicker in the corner of my vision, and I know without a doubt that I'm not safe, that someone or something knows my routines, my life, my every move. The worst part is the uncertainty. I don't know what they wanted. I don't know how long they've been watching. And I will never know if they're still out there waiting, patient, ready to strike again. All I know is this: some people or forces don't need to break in to terrify. They only need to exist in the shadows of your life, to whisper your name, to remind you that control is an illusion and safety is never guaranteed. And sometimes, when I lie in bed, I can almost hear them, soft, deliberate footsteps in the hall, moving closer, just out of sight.